3:47 a.m. The raid was over, but the real crisis had just begun. A police K-9 named Rex, a decorated German shepherd, stood over 3 wounded officers in a shattered apartment hallway. His own handlers, teeth bared, body coiled, every trained instinct shattered by trauma. The SWAT team was cornered, fingers on triggers, facing the one weapon they never thought would turn on them, until a rookie shelter worker walked past the barricade. Her name was Amanda, 24 years old. She'd been at the city animal shelter for 11 months. Her job was cleaning kennels and processing adoptions. She had no tactical training, no police background, no authority to be inside a crime scene perimeter. But she saw what the SWAT team didn't. The dog wasn't attacking. He was screaming. And when she stepped forward and spoke a single word into the chaos, every weapon in the hallway turned toward her. To understand why Rex snapped, you have to understand what he was. A German shepherd from a line bred in Europe for police work, purchased by the department for $12,000. He completed 800 hours of tactical training, patrol, detection, suspect apprehension. His success rate was 97%, but his file also contained 2 prior incident reports. Both noted heightened agitation following loud explosive stimuli. Both were classified as minor oversight. The raid that night was a narcotics warrant for a suspected meth distributor, a 3rd-floor apartment. Intel suggested the suspect was armed. Standard procedure called for a controlled breach. But when the door gave way, the suspect threw a commercial-grade firework into the hallway. Not a gun, a firework. The detonation was deafening in the enclosed space. Rex's handler, Officer Mark Vasquez, was leading him on a short leash. The shockwave hit them both. Vasquez stumbled. Rex didn't. The dog surged forward into the dark apartment, his training overriding the noise, seeking the threat. What he found was a closet. And inside that closet, the suspect had hidden not drugs, but 2 terrified pit bulls used as guard animals. They charged. Rex engaged. It was 3 dogs in a violent, snarling knot in the pitch black. Vasquez rushed in, shouting the release command. Rex didn't release. He couldn't. He was fighting for his life. Vasquez reached into the tangle to grab his collar. That's when one of the pit bulls latched onto Vasquez's forearm. Bone cracked. Vasquez screamed. And that scream from his handler was the second trigger. Rex disengaged from the pit bulls and turned. He saw his handler on the ground, a strange dog attached to him. In the canine brain, flooded with adrenaline and sonic trauma, the protocol shattered. The enemy was no longer the suspect. The enemy was anything near his fallen partner. He lunged at the closest moving shape. It was Officer Chen coming in to assist. The bite tore through Chen's tactical sleeve and into his bicep. Another officer tried to pull Rex off. He was bitten on the leg, chaos, shouting. More fireworks were set off by the suspect in the confusion. Rex broke into the hallway, a 75-pound projectile of pure combat stress. He found Vasquez again, now being treated by a 3rd officer. He saw hands on his handler. He attacked. That was the moment the mission collapsed. 3 officers down. All by their own K-9. The SWAT team contained the suspect and the pit bulls, but now they were barricaded at the end of the hall with a new, impossible problem. A weapon they couldn't reason with. A dog that saw every uniform as a threat. They tried verbal commands. They tried deploying a ballistic shield to approach. Rex charged the shield, biting the edge, shaking it with a force that nearly wrenched it from their grip. The lieutenant in charge made the call. If the dog couldn't be subdued, they would have to use lethal force. They owed it to their wounded. They just needed a clean shot. That's when the radio chatter from the perimeter reached the lieutenant. A woman was insisting she could help, a shelter worker. Her van was parked behind the line. She'd heard the call for animal control on the scanner. Amanda worked the night shift at the city shelter because the nights were quieter. Fewer visitors, fewer triggers for the anxious dogs in her care. She was the one who handled the red flag cases, the dogs deemed unadoptable for aggression. She had a 70% rehabilitation rate. Colleagues called it a gift. She called it listening. She didn't use treats or tricks at first. She used silence. She would sit outside a fearful dog's kennel for hours, reading a book, letting the animal learn her scent and her calm. Her methodology wasn't taught in any manual. It was built from observing hundreds of broken animals. She understood that aggression was almost always fear wearing a different mask. When the scanner in the shelter's intake office crackled with the police dispatch, "Officer down, K9 involved, need animal control ASAP," she knew. Animal control would bring catch poles and trank guns. They would see a vicious dog. They wouldn't see a traumatized soldier. She drove the shelter's van to the cordon. She argued with a patrol officer. She showed her shelter badge. Finally relented, escorting her to the building but not inside. She heard the shouting echoing down the stairwell, the deep, continuous growl. She walked past him and up the stairs. Every step was calculated, slow, her hands visible. She reached the hallway and saw the scene, the blood on the floor, the 3 injured officers being dragged back, the circle of armored men aiming rifles, and in the center, Rex, panting, dripping saliva, eyes wide and unseeing. He was in a state called trigger stacking. Every loud noise, every threat had piled on top of the last until his nervous system short-circuited. He wasn't guarding anymore. He was trapped in a feedback loop of terror. Amanda took one breath. She didn't look at the SWAT team. She looked at the dog's body language, the pinned ears, the whale eye, the low, stiff tail. This wasn't aggression. This was a panic attack with teeth. She stepped into the hallway. A SWAT officer yelled at her to get back. She kept walking. 10 feet from Rex, she stopped. Didn't kneel. She turned her body slightly to the side, a non-threatening posture. She lowered her gaze and she said one word, not a command, not a name, a sound. A soft, breathy vowel-consonant blend she used for dogs too stressed for language. It was a sound that mimicked a calming signal dogs use with each other. Rex's growl hitched. His head tilted a fraction. He was listening. Amanda took one slow step closer. She repeated the sound. Rex's mouth closed. The tension in his shoulders dropped. He took a shuddering breath. And then, as if the fight had been sucked out of him by a vacuum, he lay down. He rolled onto his side, exposing his belly. A sign of ultimate submission and trust. The hallway was utterly silent. The lieutenant lowered his rifle, staring. He looked from the subdued dog to the young woman in the olive green uniform. His voice, when it came, was hard with disbelief and suspicion. "Who the hell are you?" Amanda didn't answer him. She was looking at Rex, whose eyes were now clear, fixed on her. She saw the confusion there, the shame, and she knew the hardest part was yet to come. Because calming him was one thing. The department's protocol for a K9 that bites officers was another. It was a mandatory behavioral euthanasia review. By saving him, she might have just signed his death warrant. The lieutenant's name was Carson, 22 years on the force. He'd seen K9's work. He'd never seen one shut down like that. He ordered 2 of his men to secure Rex with a muzzle and a lead. The dog offered no resistance. He just kept looking at Amanda, his tail giving a single, weak thump against the floor as the muzzle strap was fastened. Carson turned his full attention to the woman in the shelter uniform. "I asked you a question. Who are you?" Amanda finally met his gaze. "Amanda Price, City Animal Shelter. I was listening to the scanner. You interfered in an active police operation. I prevented you from shooting a dog having a psychological breakdown," she replied, her voice still calm. That directness caught Carson off guard. He had 3 wounded men, a collapsed raid, and now this. He motioned to an officer. "Escort her downstairs. Get her statement. Do not let her leave." Amanda was taken to a patrol car at the perimeter. She gave her statement to a detective named Ruiz. She stuck to the facts. She heard the call. She came to help. She used non-threatening canine calming signals. She did not mention the specific sound she used. Ruiz kept circling back to it. "What did you say to the dog?" "It's not a word, it's a tone." "What tone?" "One that signals no threat." Ruiz leaned forward. "Miss Price, that dog attacked 3 police officers. He's a piece of evidence. And you just performed what looks like a specialized behavioral reset on him. How did you know it would work?" Amanda paused. "Because I've seen it before. Dogs in extreme stress forget their training. They revert to primal fear. You can't command them out of it. You have to reassure them out of it." Ruiz's notebook closed with a snap. "We're going to need to talk to your supervisor." Meanwhile, Rex was transported to the department's K9 training facility in a secure van. He was placed in an isolation kennel. Protocol was clear. Any K9 that bites an officer without a direct command is immediately suspended from duty. A use of force review board would be convened within 72 hours. The board's options were limited: retraining and recertification, or permanent decommissioning. But decommissioning for a dog with a bite history, especially against handlers, almost always meant euthanasia. The department couldn't adopt out a liability. Officer Vasquez was in surgery for his arm. Chen and the other officer were being treated for serious lacerations. The story was already leaking. A local crime blogger posted, "SWAT team mauled by own dog during botched raid by 5 a.m." At the shelter, Amanda's boss, a weary man named Gary, was woken by a call from Internal Affairs. They asked about Amanda's qualifications, her history, any specialized training. Gary was confused. "She's a good worker, great with the difficult cases. No formal training beyond our shelter certification." "Why?" The answer sent a chill through him. He called Amanda as she was finally being released from the perimeter. "Amanda, what did you do? The police are asking about you like you're a suspect." "I stopped them from killing a dog," she said, exhaustion seeping into her voice. "It's more than that. They're asking if you have military K-9 experience, if you've ever trained attack dogs." Amanda was silent for a long moment. I don't." "I know what you told me," Gary said. "But the way you handle animals, it's not normal, Amanda. It's preternatural. People are going to start asking where you learned it." She went home to her small apartment, the one with photographs of dogs on the walls, not people. She made tea but didn't drink it. She sat in the dark and saw Rex's eyes. The moment the panic cleared, she'd seen that look too many times, in sheltered dogs who'd been beaten, in dogs rescued from fighting rings. It was the look of a creature returning to itself and realizing what it had done. The shame was worse than the aggression. It was a sign the dog could be saved. But institutions don't deal in shame. They deal in liability. The next morning, the story was on the local news. The police department gave a terse statement. "An officer-involved K-9 incident during the execution of a warrant is under internal review. 3 officers sustained non-life-threatening injuries. The K-9 is secured." They did not mention Amanda, but someone at the scene had talked. By noon, the narrative had a new, irresistible angle. Shelter worker stops vicious police dog with one word. The video was grainy, shot from a cell phone across the street, but it showed enough. The armored officers, the tense standoff, a woman walking calmly into frame, and the dog lying down. It went viral by 3 p.m. Amanda's phone began to ring. Unknown numbers, requests for interviews. Gary called again, his voice strained. "The police are here with a warrant for your employment file and your personnel records." "On what grounds?" "They said it's part of the animal risk assessment for the K-9. They need to evaluate the methodology used." It was a pretext, and they both knew it. Amanda drove to the shelter. 2 detectives were waiting, Ruiz and a new one, a woman named Grayson. They were polite, cold. They took copies of her file. They asked Gary to leave the office. Grayson placed a digital recorder on the desk. "Miss Price, we need to understand your interaction with K-9 Rex for our report. Can you describe in exact detail the technique you used?" Amanda repeated what she'd said before. "A calming signal, a non-threatening posture." Grayson nodded. "We consulted the department's head K-9 trainer, Sergeant Hollies. He has 28 years of experience. He said what you describe is a foundational technique. He also said it would never, ever work on a dog in what he called combat drive. The dog was too escalated, yet it worked for you, immediately. Why?" Amanda felt the walls of the room tight. "Maybe Sergeant Hollies has never seen a dog that far gone. Or maybe," Ruiz interjected, "you used something more specific, something that dog was conditioned to respond to. A command from a previous trainer, perhaps." The implication hung in the air. They thought she had a prior connection to the dog or to its training. Amanda stood up. "Are you accusing me of something?" "We're trying to understand an anomaly," Grayson said smoothly. "The dog is a $12,000 asset. His behavior is a central part of an officer injury investigation. Your intervention is a central part of his behavior. We need to account for it, fully." They asked for a list of all her previous employers. They asked if she'd ever worked for a private security firm, a military contractor, a dog training academy. She said no. They asked for permission to search her personal vehicle, the shelter van she'd driven. She refused without a warrant. The atmosphere turned to ice. As they left, Grayson handed Amanda a subpoena. It commanded her to appear before the K-9 Use of Force Review Board in 48 hours. She was listed as a relevant witness. Amanda spent the next day in a fog of dread. The subpoena meant she would have to sit in a room with police command staff and justify her actions, while they decided whether to put a dog to death. She called the only lawyer she knew, a family friend who did real estate closings. He listened and said, "Amanda, this isn't about the dog. They're building a case for negligence. If they can show the dog was improperly trained or had a known defect, they can limit liability for the officer's injuries. You, by being an expert who miraculously calmed it, threatened that narrative. You proved the dog was capable of control. That makes the incident the handler's fault or the department. They will come for you." That evening, she broke her own rule and drove to the outskirts of the city to a small, unmarked farm. She knocked on the door of a weathered ranch house. An older man, sinewy and sharp-eyed, answered. He didn't look surprised. "I saw the news," he said. His name was Leo. He was retired. 30 years ago, he had run the K-9 breeding and early socialization program for a federal agency so obscure it only had a letter for a name. He was the one who had taught a 9-year-old Amanda how to speak to dogs. He was her grandfather. "Come in," he sighed. "Tell me what you actually said to the dog." In the quiet of his kitchen over coffee, she told him everything. The firework, the pit bulls, the handler's scream, the trigger stacking, and the sound she used. Leo's face grew grim. "You used the distress breaker." It wasn't a question. The distress breaker was a technique he'd developed, a specific auditory signal paired with body language designed to pierce through canine panic attacks. It was used only in extreme scenarios for dogs whose jobs involved high explosives and gunfire. It was never written down. It was taught one-on-one in silence. "I had to," Amanda said. "They were going to shoot him. And now they know the signal exists," Leo said. "And they know a shelter worker knows it. Amanda, that technique is a fingerprint. It traces back to a very small, very closed community, my old community." "What are they going to do?" Leo stared into his cup. "They're going to do what any bureaucracy does. They're going to eliminate the anomaly. They will euthanize the dog to close the case, and they will discredit you to neutralize the problem. If they can't discredit you," he didn't finish. Amanda returned home more unsettled than before. The next morning, the day of the review board, she dressed in simple, professional clothes. She was about to leave when her doorbell rang. It was a courier with a sealed envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a page from a canine training log. The dog was listed by a serial number, not a name. The breed, German Shepherd. The line item read, "Subject exposed to controlled detonations. Showed exceptional resilience but marked sensitivity to high-frequency concussive sounds. Flag for future monitoring." The date was 3 years prior. At the bottom of the page in the comments section was a handwritten note. "See Foundational Socialization File, Breeder Socializer, L. Vale, Leo." And next to that, another handwritten word circled, "Vulnerable." The page was a ghost from Rex's past. It was his pre-police training record. It proved the department or the contractor who sold them the dog knew he had a susceptibility to loud explosions, a known defect. Amanda's hands trembled. This changed everything. This wasn't just a dog snapping. This was a predictable failure. This was liability. The note was unsigned, but someone had sent it to her. Someone inside the system was handing her a weapon. The question was, why? And what did they expect her to do with it? She folded the paper into her pocket. It felt like a live wire. As she drove to the police administration building, she realized the hearing wasn't a trial for the dog anymore. It was a trap, and she was walking into it with a secret that could blow the entire case wide open or get her buried alongside the dog. The hearing room was smaller than she'd imagined. Windowless, a long table with 5 officials. Lieutenant Carson was there not as the decision-maker but as a witness. The head of the K-9 unit, Sergeant Hollies, a man with a granite jaw and cold eyes. two internal affairs representatives, and a city attorney. Amanda was shown to a single chair facing them, no lawyer present. They did not offer her one. The city attorney, a woman named Walsh, opened the proceedings. This is an administrative review of the officer-involved K9 incident on April 12th. The subject is the future service status of K9 Rex. Ms. Price, you are here as a witness to the animal's behavior post-incident. Please describe your actions. Amanda gave her account again, sticking to the calming signal explanation. When she finished, Sergeant Hollies leaned forward. That's a fascinating theory. Stress-induced trigger stacking. Where did you study canine combat trauma psychology? I didn't study it, I observe it, in shelter dogs. Shelter dogs, Hollies repeated as if the words were absurd. We're talking about a precision tool, a dog with 800 hours of specialized training. You're telling me it responds like a stray in a pound. I'm telling you that under enough stress, any animal reverts to its core instincts. Training is a layer on top of that. It can be stripped away. Hollies smiled thinly. He tapped a folder. We pulled your shelter's success rates. Your red flag rehabilitation numbers are frankly unbelievable. 70%. The national average for severe aggression cases is under 20. It suggests either miraculous talent or a different kind of experience. Have you ever been employed by or contracted with Canine Tactical Solutions International? The name landed like a physical blow. CTSI was the private military contractor that had supplied dogs to the department for the last decade. It was also, not coincidentally, the company that had employed her grandfather, Leo, decades prior, before it was even called CTSI. No, Amanda said, her throat tight. I haven't. Interesting, Holly said, sliding a photograph from the folder. It was a picture of a younger Leo in tactical gear, standing with a group of men and dogs in a desert environment. It was from a trade journal article about pioneering K9 breeders. Do you know this man? Amanda's heart hammered against her ribs. He's my grandfather, Leonard Vale, former chief breeding supervisor for the precursor agency to CTSI, a legend in certain circles. He developed several now standardized conditioning protocols, including, I'm told, a distress interruption technique for noise-phobic animals. He looked directly at her. Did your grandfather teach you how to handle that dog? The room was utterly still. They had connected the dots, not all the way, but enough. Amanda chose her words with care. My grandfather taught me to respect animals, that's all. Walsh, the city attorney, interjected. Miss Price, the point of this line of questioning is to establish the dog's state of mind. The department's position is that K9 Rex experienced an unforeseeable acute stress reaction. Your intervention, while appreciated, is being evaluated. If the dog had a pre-existing, known vulnerability, that changes the liability landscape significantly. That's when Amanda understood the real game. They weren't trying to prove she was a secret expert. They were trying to prove the dog was flawed. If the dog was flawed, the department's liability for the officer's injuries decreased. The manufacturer, CTSI, would be on the hook, and she was their key to proving it. They wanted her to testify that the dog was psychologically broken, that only a specialized technique from a CTSI-linked expert could calm it. They were going to use her and her grandfather's legacy to shift the blame. But she had the document in her pocket, the proof they already knew. She made a decision. What if it was foreseeable, she asked quietly. The officials exchanged glances. Explain, Walsh said. Amanda pulled the photocopied page from her pocket and laid it on the table. She didn't hand it over, she let them read it upside down. Hollies' eyes locked on the serial number, then on the handwritten note. His face lost all color. Where did you get that? It was delivered to me. This is Rex's pre-purchase socialization log. It flags a sensitivity to high-frequency concussive sounds. It says vulnerable. This dog was known to be at risk. Someone knew. Was it your department? Or was it CTSI who sold you a defective product? The room erupted into controlled chaos. Walsh demanded to see the document. Hollies argued it was inadmissible, possibly forged. Lieutenant Carson just stared at Amanda, a new, grudging respect in his eyes. She had just turned their trap inside out. The hearing was adjourned immediately. An internal affairs officer escorted Amanda out a back door. You shouldn't have done that, the officer muttered. Now it's a cover-up investigation, not a dog review. That's what it always was, Amanda replied. She wasn't 10 feet from the building when her phone rang. A blocked number, she answered. A calm male voice spoke. The document was a test, you passed. Then the line went dead. Amanda stood on the sidewalk, the city noise swirling around her. A test. Someone had sent her the proof to see if she would use it, to see which side she was on. She felt like a pawn on a board she couldn't see. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. The story exploded in the press, but the narrative had mutated. Police dog had known sound trauma, records suggest. Shelter worker uncovers possible K9 cover-up. The department went into full lockdown mode, issuing a statement about a comprehensive internal and external review. CTSI's stock price dipped. Reporters camped outside Amanda's apartment. Gary called, panicked. The shelter's board was receiving calls questioning her fitness and agenda. She was placed on paid administrative leave. For your safety, Gary said, but they both knew it was to distance the shelter from the coming storm. Amanda retreated to Leo's farm. He'd seen the news. You lit the fuse, he said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. Now the explosion comes. CTSI has billions in government contracts. They won't let a $12,000 dog sink a deal. They'll find a scapegoat. Who? The handler, Vasquez. They'll say he missed the cues, failed his dog, or, he looked at her, they'll say the flaw was introduced later, by an outside influence, by someone who destabilized the dog with unorthodox methods. Me. You. 2 days later, a new article appeared in a prominent online news outlet. It was sourced from anonymous department officials. The headline: Shelter worker, grandfather linked to dog's original breeder, questions raised about prior contact. The article wove a subtle but damning narrative that Amanda's grandfather socialized the dog, that Amanda may have had prior knowledge of its triggers, and that her intervention wasn't heroic, but potentially a staged demonstration to embarrass the department and benefit a rival training firm. It was fiction, but it was plausible fiction. The comments section filled with venom. Animal rights activist sabotages police. She probably triggered the dog on purpose. Amanda was being erased, transformed from a savior into a conspirator. That night, as she sat in Leo's living room staring at the hateful words on the screen, her phone rang again. The blocked number. She answered, fury in her voice. Who is this? The same calm male voice. Do you want to save the dog, or do you want to win the argument? What? Rex is scheduled for behavioral euthanasia tomorrow at 10 a.m., the review board's final decision. The document you revealed accelerated the timeline. They're closing the file. Amanda's blood went cold. They can't, that's murder. It's bureaucracy. There's a second document, Miss Price, the one that matters, the purchase invoice and waiver. It has a clause, Section 4B, that transfers all liability for latent behavioral or psychological defects back to the department if the dog is deployed in a tactical capacity without a specific signed waiver from the commanding officer. That waiver was never signed. Lieutenant Carson didn't even know it existed. If that clause becomes public, the department is fully liable for millions in damages. They'll destroy the dog to keep that clause buried. How do you know this? I wrote the clause, the voice said. My name is Aris Thorne. I was the lead risk assessor for CTSI for 8 years. I resigned last year. I've been collecting the pieces. You have one. I have others. Meet me. If you want to pull the thread that unravels this whole thing, be at the old waterfront warehouse, Pier 7, at 8 tomorrow morning. Come alone, and for God's sake, lose the press. He hung up. Amanda told Leo everything. He was silent for a long time. Aris Thorne, I remember him, clever. Conscience finally caught up with him, it seems. It's a trap or it's a lifeline, 50-50. I have to go, Amanda said. I know, Leo replied. You always did. The next morning at 7:45, under a blanket of gray drizzle, Amanda stood on the decaying boards of Pier 7. The warehouse loomed, rust and peeling paint. Her hand was in her pocket, wrapped around a small can of pepper spray. The door was ajar. She stepped into the gloom. The air smelled of salt, oil, and rot. Over here, a voice called softly. A man in his late 50s, wearing a worn pea coat, stood beside a metal work table. A laptop was open, glowing. Aris Thorne. He looked tired, earnest. "Thank you for coming." "Where's the proof?" Amanda asked, not moving closer. Thorne nodded. He turned the laptop screen toward her. It showed a scanned document, the purchase agreement for K9 Rex. He zoomed in on Clause 4B, then he pulled a USB drive from his pocket. "On this drive is every email, every memo, every risk assessment I did on that batch of dogs. 3 of the 12 were flagged with noise sensitivity. The department was offered a discount. They took it, they were given the waiver to sign. It got lost in procurement. The commanding officer at the time, now a deputy chief, was told it was a formality. He never signed. The department has been deploying ticking time bombs for 3 years. Rex is just the first to go off. Why give this to me? Because you're the only one they can't silence easily. You're a civilian. You're a public interest story. If I leak it, I'm a disgruntled ex-employee. If you leak it with your story, you're a whistleblower. You can save that dog, and you can force a reform that might save others. What do you get out of it?" "I get to sleep at night," Thorne said simply. He handed her the drive. "It's encrypted. Password is the dog's serial number. You already have it." Amanda took the drive. It felt heavy. "They'll come after you." "Let them," Thorne said. "I'm already gone." He turned and walked toward a back door, melting into the shadows of the warehouse. Amanda stood alone, the weight of the evidence in her hand. She had 1 hour until Rex was scheduled to die. She could go to the media, unleash the scandal, but the process would take days. The dog would be dead by then. She needed something faster, something undeniable. She needed to stop the procedure itself. And she knew only one person with the authority to do that, and a possible reason to help: Lieutenant Carson. He hadn't known about the waiver. He'd been lied to. His men were injured because of it. He was a company man, but he was also a street cop. She pulled out her phone and called the main precinct number, asking for Carson. Miraculously, he was in. She spoke fast. "Lieutenant, it's Amanda Price. They're euthanizing Rex in 45 minutes to cover up the fact that the department bought him at a discount knowing he was broken. I have the proof. The purchase waiver that was never signed. If that dog dies, that proof goes public, and the lawsuit from your injured officers will name the department for negligence, not CTSI. You can stop this. You can demand a stay pending new evidence." There was a long silence on the line. She could hear his breathing. "Where are you?" he asked. "The waterfront. I have the documents." "Stay there. I'm sending a car. Do not talk to anyone else." The line went dead. 15 minutes later, an unmarked sedan pulled up. Detective Ruiz was driving. He didn't speak, just nodded for her to get in. He drove not to the precinct, but to the K9 facility. Carson was standing outside the main entrance, his face like stone. "Give it to me," he said. Amanda handed him the USB drive. "Password is the dog's serial number. It's on the document I showed you." Carson took it, his jaw working. "If this is a stunt, it's not. You were set up. Your men were hurt because of a cost-cutting decision someone above you made." Carson stared at her, then at the building where Rex was inside, awaiting a lethal injection. He made a decision. He turned and walked inside, brushing past a veterinary technician holding a medical kit. Amanda followed, Ruiz at her side. They entered a sterile medical room. Rex was there, muzzled, lying on a table, an IV line already in his paw. A vet and a department administrator looked up, startled. "Stop the procedure," Carson said, his voice cutting through the room. "On whose authority?" the administrator snapped. "On mine, and on the authority of evidence of departmental negligence and a possible cover-up. This dog is now evidence in an IA investigation. He stays alive." The vet looked to the administrator, who was turning red. "You can't just watch me," Carson said. He turned to the vet. "Remove the IV, sedate him for transport if you have to, but no lethal drugs." The room was tense, but Carson's rank and intensity won. The vet slowly removed the catheter. Rex lifted his head weakly, his eyes finding Amanda. He gave a soft whine. She had reached him just in time. But as Carson turned to her, the USB drive in his hand, she saw the conflict in his eyes. He had the evidence. He had the dog. And now he had a choice. Expose the truth and potentially bring down his own department, or bury it deeper than ever. He held up the drive. "This never came from you," he said. "You were never here today." "Understood." Amanda understood. He was taking control of the narrative. He would decide the truth. She had saved the dog's life, but she had just handed the fate of the story and possibly her own safety to a man whose loyalties were ultimately to the badge. As she walked out of the facility into the damp morning, the fight was over, but the war for the truth had just entered a darker, more uncertain phase. For 72 hours, there was only silence. No news reports, no calls from internal affairs, no update on Rex. Amanda stayed at Leo's farm, jumping at every car that passed on the gravel road. The waiting was a different kind of torture. She had handed over a bomb and had no idea if it had been defused or was simply ticking in a drawer somewhere. On the fourth morning, a short article appeared in the business section of the local paper. Canine Tactical Solutions International announces voluntary review of canine selection protocols. The piece was dry, corporate. It mentioned a comprehensive internal audit and enhanced transparency measures. There was no mention of the police department, no mention of a dog, no mention of her. Later that day, Gary called. "You can come back to work effective immediately. The police have closed their inquiry. They said your assistance was noted and appreciated." His tone was careful. "What does that mean, Gary?" "It means," he said slowly, "that everyone has decided to move on. I take the win, Amanda. Come back to the dogs. They need you." She returned to the shelter the next day. Her coworkers greeted her with a subdued respect, asking no questions. The kennels were the same. The barking, the smells, the anxious eyes. It was a relief. She was cleaning a run when a familiar figure appeared at the gate. Lieutenant Carson. He was in civilian clothes, jeans, and a jacket. He looked older. "Can we talk?" he asked. They walked to a small courtyard behind the shelter. Carson didn't waste time. "Rex is alive. He's been officially retired from service. The department is covering all medical costs for Vasquez, Chen, and O'Malley. They've been promoted to light duty with full pay." Amanda waited. "And the waiver, the cover-up," Carson's jaw tightened. "The deputy chief who oversaw the purchase has taken an early retirement. The procurement officer has been reassigned. CTSI has voided the purchase contracts for the entire batch of dogs and offered full refunds. New dogs will come from a different vendor with full disclosure protocols. That's it. No charges, no public admission." "The public admission," Carson said, "is that procedures have been improved. The department avoided a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. The officers are being cared for. The defective system is being corrected. And a dog is alive. Sometimes that's the victory you get. It's not a headline. It's a quiet fix." Amanda studied him. "Why did you do it? You could have buried the drive. You had every reason to." Carson looked out at the scrubby trees beyond the fence. "Vasquez is a good cop. He loved that dog. When he woke up after surgery, his first question wasn't about his arm. It was, 'Did you put Rex down?' When I told him not yet, he made me promise to try to save him. He said it wasn't the dog's fault. It was the job's fault. Our fault." He turned back to her. "You were right. We asked an animal to do a soldier's job, ignored its weaknesses to save money, and then blamed it when it broke. That's not justice. It's cowardice. I became a cop to fight cowards." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is for you." It was an official transfer of ownership document. The department was releasing K9 Rex, serial number GSD 724, into the custody of Amanda Price for the purpose of behavioral rehabilitation and permanent retirement. It was signed by Carson, the head of the K9 unit, and the city attorney. "He's yours," Carson said. "If you want him, he's at a private veterinary rehab center. He's not good. The stress, the medication, the confusion. The vets say he's shut down. He doesn't eat unless hand-fed. He startles at sudden noises. He might never be a normal dog." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. She took the paper. "I want him." The next week was a blur of preparations. Leo helped her build a secure, quiet run at his farm. She filled it with soft bedding, toys, and a covered den area. When she went to the rehab center to pick up Rex, he was a shadow of the powerful animal from the hallway. He was thin, his coat dull. He shuffled rather than walked. When he saw her, he didn't wag his tail. He just stared, then slowly lowered his head. The vet warned her. "He may never recover from this. The trauma is profound. Canine PTSD is real. He might always be fragile, Amanda nodded. He doesn't have to recover, he just has to feel safe. The first few days at the farm, Rex didn't leave his den. Amanda would sit nearby for hours, reading, speaking softly. She didn't try to touch him. On the fifth day, he emerged and took a piece of chicken from her hand. It was a start. Meanwhile, the world moved on. A follow-up news story ran, titled Department Reforms K-9 Program After Incident. It mentioned improved screening and ethical procurement. Amanda's name was not in it. The viral video of her in the hallway was still up, but the comments had shifted. Some called her a hero. Others still speculated about conspiracy. She stopped reading them. A month after the raid, Officer Vasquez asked to visit. He came with his arm in a sling. He stood at the fence of Rex's run, his face pale. Rex, who was lying in the sun, saw him. The dog stood up slowly. He walked to the fence, sniffed the air, and then let out a soft, whimpering sound. Vasquez began to cry. He knelt, wincing at the pain in his arm, and pressed his forehead against the chain link. "I'm so sorry, boy," he whispered. Rex whined again and lay down, pressing his body against the fence near Vasquez. It was forgiveness. It was also goodbye. Life settled into a new rhythm. Amanda returned to work at the shelter full-time. Rex continued his slow healing. He would never be a pet in the traditional sense. Loud noises sent him trembling into his den, but he learned to play with a single, specific ball. He learned to enjoy being brushed. He would follow Amanda from room to room in Leo's house, always a few feet behind, a quiet, steady presence. He was broken, but he was alive, and he was safe. Amanda thought that was the end of the story. Then, 6 months later, a formal envelope arrived at the shelter. It was from the city council, an invitation to serve on a newly formed Animal-Assisted Intervention Advisory Board. The board's mandate was to explore the use of therapy and wellness dogs within the police and fire departments. The covering letter mentioned her demonstrated expertise in canine behavioral crisis intervention. It was signed by several council members and one other person, Lieutenant Carson, now promoted to captain, listed as the department's liaison. It was an olive branch. It was also an acknowledgement. They weren't giving her back her moment in the headlines, but they were offering her a seat at the table, a chance to use her knowledge to prevent the next Rex. She accepted. The first meeting was in a city hall conference room. Carson was there. He gave her a brief nod. The discussions were bureaucratic about budgets and breeds and liability waivers, but at the end, as people packed up, Carson approached her. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. He handed her a flash drive. It was different from the one she'd given him. "This is the raw data from the CTSI audit, the full scope. It names names. It shows the financial pressure to cut corners." It wasn't just one deputy chief. It was a systemic rot. "I can't make it public. My job, the stability of the department, depends on the reforms happening quietly, but you should have it, in case the quiet doesn't last." Amanda took the drive. It was the unvarnished truth, a dangerous, priceless thing. "Why give it to me now?" Carson smiled, a tired, genuine smile. "Because you're the keeper of the story, and some stories shouldn't be entirely forgotten." Amanda left City Hall and drove to the farm. It was evening. Leo was on the porch. Rex was at his feet watching the sunset. She sat on the steps and scratched behind Rex's ears. He leaned into her hand, his eyes closing. He would never be the dog he was bred to be. He was something else now, a survivor, a reminder. She looked at the flash drive in her other hand, then out at the darkening fields. The truth was safe. The dog was safe. And she had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to expose the war, but to quietly mend the wounds it leaves behind. The story wasn't about a secret word or a conspiracy or a viral moment. It was about what comes after the silence. It was about the long, patient work of healing. And as the first stars appeared, Amanda knew that work was enough. So what is the true cost of a working dog? We measure it in dollars for purchase, hours for training, successes on the record. We rarely account for the silent cost paid in stress, in instinct betrayed, in the fragile line between tool and living creature. The story of Rex and Amanda isn't an anomaly. It's a symptom. Across the country, Approximately 3,600 people visit emergency rooms each year due to police K9 bites. Behind each statistic is a dog bred for aggression, pushed beyond a breaking point it cannot articulate, and a system designed to discard it when it fails. Amanda's single word in that hallway wasn't magic. It was translation. It was the act of seeing the creature beneath the weapon. Rex lived out his remaining years on Leo's farm. He never fully recovered from the psychological wounds of that night, but he found a quiet peace. He passed away 2 years later, asleep in his den, with Amanda by his side. The department's Therapy K9 program, which Amanda helped design, has since placed wellness dogs in 5 precincts. Early data shows a measurable drop in officer stress reports. Lieutenant Carson, now a captain, still keeps the encrypted drive in a safe. The unvarnished truth, dormant but not destroyed. Amanda continues her work at the shelter, specializing in the rehabilitation of dogs from high-stress backgrounds. She never gave another media interview. The viral video still exists, a frozen moment of chaos and calm, divorced from the complex, muddy truth that followed. The deeper lesson here isn't about a secret technique or a conspiracy uncovered. It's about value. How we value loyalty, how we value truth, and how we value the lives we enlist in our service. We ask animals to absorb the shocks of our violence, to patrol the edges of our safety, and we are often unprepared to care for the scars they earn. The next time you see a working dog in an airport on a patrol, remember the duality. They are both shield and soul, and we owe them more than disposal when the shield cracks. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the quiet power of empathy over force, then your engagement matters. Stories like this one survive only when people choose to listen, to question, and to care. Please subscribe. Your subscription tells the algorithm that depth has value, that nuance is worth the time, and that some truths are too important to scroll past. Thank you for watching.